There's only one person in the One Piece story who Luffy actually carries a grudge with, and it's not Blackbeard, surprisingly, who captured Ace, his brother, and was pretty much the reason why Ace died. No, we've seen Luffy battle Blackbeard during Impel Down, even though it was a couple of clashes, and even talked to him during Dressrosa, and the man is not Luffy's true grudge. I'm referring to the one who actually killed his dear beloved brother Portgas D. Ace, and also scarred permanently himself. We have to remember scars carry stories from Whitebeard and Shanks Figureline Garland storyline that could be done. Or of course it could be Roger, who knows, to Blackbeard and Shanks and that scar there, to even Crocodile before he headed to the New World when he was getting questioned by Dawes Bones. So Luffy grabbing his scar when hearing Akainu is the new Fleet Admiral from Jinbei during Fishman Island made me think of a great video idea. Akainu versus Luffy, Fleet Admiral versus Yonko. Who wins? Just recently in the last 2 chapters, Luffy has gotten back to full power by eating. And we've seen it with that hockeyed up punch in Gear 5th that he did to the Admiral Kizaru that sent him to the ground. And then also with that Boom Dawn Gatling he did recently in the last chapter to Saturn. That move was so devastating. It sent Saturn flying, and Saturn's huge. Now you have to understand, Saturn is also the same character who's pretty much is doing amazing in this arc. Some people are like, what is no, he's able to regenerate himself and he's able to get back up after a Yonko level attack. We saw what happened to Eustace Kid after he took a Yonko level attack. So you have to understand, Saturn is strong. So Luffy doing that is also a feat for Luffy. Of course, we know Akainu's coming off of his amazing performance during the Marineford War, and Luffy's coming off his amazing performance during the Wano War. So let's talk about it. The earliest we see Sakazuki is when he's a Vice Admiral on the Ohara Island Buster Call situation, and yet he does not fight. Aokiji does fight in the situation against Vice Admiral. Akainu does not fight, so I'm going to use Aokiji to power skill Akainu at his early days as a Vice Admiral. Now we see Saul, who was also a Vice Admiral, pick up an entire warship, and of course not just that, throws the warship to another warship and destroys it. That is definitely a really big feat, and it makes sense. He's a giant Vice Admiral. Then Kuzan low diffs this character, and I'm thinking Akainu should be relatively on the same level as Kuzan. Now I do want to say this, because of his savageness, he might even have an edge, as we've seen during the Ohara incident when he of course killed the innocent civilians because he thought a scholar could of course sneak on the ship. But to answer how strong I thought Sakazuki was at his early age as a Vice Admiral, I think minimum around Doflamingo level, Cracker, Jack, yeah, that Yonko Commander, like 3rd level, that 3rd Yonko Commander level that I'm mentioning right now, I believe that Akainu was minimum at that level, and would even go as far as to say he might even be reaching King, Queen level when it comes to his power scaling. But since he didn't fight, I won't go that crazy with the speculation, but I'll try my best this entire video to have little speculation when it comes to power scaling Akainu. So let's look at some outside information before we get into the manga details. Now I really enjoy looking at Viva cards for new information in the story, and one thing we found out is that Akainu's Viva card, he was the highest offensive power of any Delve Fruit, the highest tier to be exact, and it makes sense. His Magma Delve Fruit ability can melt through anything, as seen with Ace's Logia. The fact he was able to melt through another Logia, and of course also Jinbei, who's a fishman, not a regular human, a fishman. Just think about Luffy versus Kaido in that final form that Kaido had, that he was using Magma, and Luffy had to use Advanced Armor Haki or Ryo so he wouldn't touch Kaido. Now think about Akainu fighting Luffy the entire fight using Magma. Insane. Speaking of Advanced Ryo, Advanced Armor Haki, Akainu was also one of the few characters to showcase pre-time skip Advanced Armor Haki during Marineford when Whitebeard was attacking John the Giant with the Quake. Akainu and the rest of the admirals showcased their Advanced Armor Haki. For perspective, Luffy, after defeating Doflamingo, Cracker, and Katakuri, finally started to learn Advanced Armor Haki during his time in Udon training with Hyogoro, and his finishing blow versus Kaido was that. Now, the first time we see Akainu in action is versus Jozu, a top Yonko commander who throws a huge piece of ice at the Marines during Marineford. It's towering over all the giants, of course, that are vice admirals, and Akainu simply evaporates it with his teleport ability in a blink of an eye. Then he also leads a counterattack while, of course, stopping Jozu's ice attack. And the icing on the cake is, of course, him talking down to the Yonko world's strongest man, Whitebeard, showing his confidence versus the Yonko. Now, of course, we've seen characters like Marco, King, and Queen talk their shit to Yonkos, but honestly, telling a Yonko this is going to be their funeral, insane. Another scene during Marineford which really showcases Akainu's, of course, destructive capability is when he is gonna melt the ice that the Whitebeard pirates are standing on, and then he destroys their ship that carried them for decades, the Moby Dick. I know, what a dick, but seriously though, take a bias aside guys, Akainu has showed amazing feats. Now, the actual first interaction we see Akainu versus the Yonko Whitebeard was during the war. He stops his attack with his Magma Foot, and then he clashes with Whitebeard's Quake teleport ability with the Magma Fist. Now, Blackbeard is said to have the strongest Logia, but moments like this make me believe that Akainu has the strongest offensive Logia. All around, I'll give it to Blackbeard, but Akainu, you got it. Now, later on in this war arc, we see Edward Newgate Whitebeard talking about how Garp is just a legend, it's just a name, he's old, and then Akainu's like, you're from the same age, and pay attention while fighting me, and sends an attack to Whitebeard, which of course Whitebeard blocks easy, but honestly, I thought that was a very cool scene of Whitebeard and Akainu fighting. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Whitebeard is sick, Whitebeard is old, he's coughing up blood, so this is not a prime Yonko like Big Mom, like Kaido, like Shanks. This is a Yonko in his very weakest state, and of course Akainu comments on it saying he is old and attacks him point blank, taking a magma right to his chest. And honestly, can you blame him? It's a war. Anything goes in a battle. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting a lot of moments of Akainu talking shit is because he backs it up. The current fleet admiral tells the Whitebeard pirates they're cowards and their captain is a big loser. And then he goes on to low diff Ace because, of course, magma surpasses fire. And then he kills him in the next page, kills, of course, a top young commander, the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates with relative ease. Of course, Ace was trying to protect Luffy, but still, and this is a great feat compared to how Blackbeard, look how long it took Blackbeard to defeat Ace. This was way easier, and keep in mind a top young commander in Queen got 2-shotted by a nerfed Big Mom, and also Luffy got 1-shotted by the strongest creature alive, Kaido. This right here follows the Yonko power showcase of them being way above young commanders, and like I said, Akainu versus Ace really showcases this. Then of course we have the 10th Division Commander Kurio with the other Whitebeard pirates struggling to, of course, stop Akainu. And then we see Luffy's top young commander currently, Jinbei, stops Akainu. But Sakazuki says something really interesting. As a former warlord, stop wasting my time. You know my strength. Another sign of a Yonko's power showcased. Then we see Garp, Monkey D. Garp, saying, hold me back or I will kill Akainu to Sengoku. And of course, this is the same Garp who took down Rocksteed Zebek with the help of Roger. This is the same Garp that actually fought Goldie Roger, the Pirate King. Prime Roger is on a completely different level than we've seen the characters in the story, and is now going for Marshall D. Teeth to rescue Kobe. I personally believe Garp definitely believed he could kill Akainu, which is not downplaying the Red Dog. Though I think Akainu has the edge because of course he's in a younger age than Garp, but still, this is not making Akainu look lesser. We then go on to see, of course, Akainu tanking attacks from top young commanders in Marco and Vista, especially Marco, of course, fought King and Queen at the same time during Wano and is the vice captain to Whitebeard if you think about it. And of course Vista, who clashed with Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman, and didn't get destroyed. These are powerful characters with Haki, and he tanks their attack. Right after, we see Marco the Phoenix again clash with Akainu, and while he clashes with Akainu, and right after that we see Whitebeard hitting Akainu with a sneak attack, but still gets his face taken off. But of course, gets another nice quake shot to, of course, Akainu's side, his rib, that pretty much messes up Akainu pretty badly. And I'm not going to say this makes Akainu look bad, because Whitebeard, we saw him in his prime against Roger with advanced Conqueror's Haki. Of course, he didn't use it in Marineford, but he has strong Haki, so he should be able to affect the Logia of top tier status like Akainu. And with the building coming down, shows how devastating that attack really was. And we later see it a couple chapters later, Whitebeard commanders were tripping that Akainu wasn't down for the count after taking all that attacks, showing especially for a Logia his durability is really amazing. He then goes on to low diff a top young commander level character like Ivankov, with of course adding on to that Inazuma, then another top young commander level character in of course Jinbei, who's running away of course with Luffy, and Luffy gets scarred, and Crocodile has to come through another top young commander level character with the Cross Guild. That is 3 top young commander level characters I just mentioned, while still doing another attack chasing after Buggy, a Yonko with another Yonko and Luffy. Okay, but jokes aside, this guy is stupid broken. Now for me, Akainu got the most clout when he says, "Do you all want to die protecting Luffy?" Talking to a red scabbard Wano samurai in Izo, a top swordsman in Vista, a mythical Zoan in Marco the Phoenix, who fought Blackbeard with 2 Devil Fruits in the Payback War and survived, while also showcasing incredible power with Wano, the monsters like of course Big Mom, the Yonko, Queen, and King. Then we also have Crocodile, a top young commander for the Cross Guild with a bounty nearly 2 billion berries. Oh yeah, and the rest of the Yonko crew. Insane. And you guys know I had to add RIP 10th Division Commander Kurio. I know he's not dead, but it's still funny. It takes a literal Yonko and Red Hair Shanks, who I believe to be the strongest Yonko, to actually stop this savage. And why you Red Hair is what I kind of replies to him. He is not shook in the slightest of these Yonkos, as I said before. This is further backed by him chasing a 2 Devil Fruit user in Blackbeard with the Gurgur no Mi and the Yami Yami no Mi post Marineford War. Marshal D. Teach is incredibly powerful, and with his whole crew he actually chased after them. And Teach is like, yeah, I don't want the smoke. He runs away. Now to add on to everything I just said, during the time skip, the feats don't let up as he defeated Aokiji in 10 days and took his leg with defeating him on Punkaza, which of course looks like an awakened Logia battle, but since I don't like to use speculation for power scaling, I won't say it just yet. Though I do want to say this is the first time in the series we see a top tier defeat another top tier 1v1 in the story. And don't be mentioning other fights that are not 1v1, because there's so much help in One Piece when it comes to different fights. No, Aokiji vs Akainu, which is a 1v1 on an island, no one else there, and they battled. Of course, the question of how strong he is has to be answered, but with him not showing anything post time skip like his fellow admirals, his fellow OG admirals to be more specific in Kizaru and Aokiji, Akainu even stopped Kizaru from pulling up to Wano, and we had Greenbolt, a new admiral, pretty much try to impress the fleet admiral by defeating the Yonko Luffy. I do want to mention, we recently saw Akainu fought Kuma. Though it's a nerfed Kuma, this is the same Kuma that you saw the damage it did to Saturn. Yes, Saturn can recover and regenerate, but still, that Armin Haki with a devastating Buccaneer power, and Akainu still took off almost half his head. It's like he has a knack for doing that. Shout out to Whitebeard. And it looked to be able to low diff Kuma if Kuma didn't escape. Let me remind you, like I just said, we just saw Kuma do some amazing things on Egghead Island, so this is not no scrub Kuma. So he's really flexing his muscles here as a fleet admiral. There are 2 forms of Gear 5th that we have to talk about. The most recent one we saw, I will be referring to as base Gear 5th Luffy, and in the brief period we see it, he is substantially weaker than he is when he was in Wano and first showcased the form. It's something I will discuss in more detail later on in the video, but keep in mind until then. Anyways, going back to what I was saying, how Luffy being stronger than anybody on the Grand Line at the time of the Delphu Nika's first appearance, he was literally fighting the strongest character in the verse, aka Kaido. Though I believe there are other characters who are more powerful than the Yonko in the canon story, this was emphasized during the, of course, lead up to the battle and on the rooftop that Kaido is the strongest creature alive. Now, Luffy vs. Kaido picks up when it comes to chapter 1044. It starts off with Sanji waking up all of a sudden. To put it in perspective, just recently we saw Zoro sleep through the entire Luffy battle with Rob Lucci, and Gear 5th was shown there too. When it comes to Luffy getting the reaction from Eustace Kid, Law, Hyogoro, who were also in shock just like Sanji, and even Marco, who was around Roger, Whitebeard, and all these legendary pirates, and he even highlights Luffy's presence, even though he's not even there. Luffy's not there, guys. He's still on the rooftop. That's because he's oozing in Advanced Conqueror's Haki in this Gear 5th form. Later, we see the Gorosei actually speaking on the mythical Zoan, and there they state that Luffy is only limited by his imagination, and also states awakening strengthens his rubber body exponentially. Now, for those who do not know what that means, the definition of exponentially is an increase coming more and more rapid. They also say the awakened fruit grants more freedom. Look at some of Luffy's insane attacks like UFO and Punk Hazard, and of course any of his Gear 4th forms like Bounce Man, Snake Man, and especially Tank Man. That is pretty much screaming imagination. And lastly, they say the most ridiculous power in the world, so you can see why I believe this form is stupid broken, just like the 5 elders were saying. This is even confirmed by Luffy himself, who states, "This is my peak," a great change of tone from his final Gear 4 state a couple chapters ago, where he himself repeatedly talks about Gear 4th in a negative tone, mostly with him can't losing. He does it at least 4 times, which I counted. Imagine repeatedly telling himself that this has to be enough. Now, of course, chapter 1044, his Advanced Conqueror's Haki knocked down Kaido's men when he wasn't even there yet. Kind of reminded me of Shanks vs. Greenbow, how Shanks wasn't on the island and Greenbow was getting affected by that Conqueror's Haki. And honestly, he then grabs Kaido and brings him back to the rooftop. Wow, that is what you call an intro to a form when it comes to Gear 5th. Now, I want to talk about some of the crazy techniques and abilities that this Nika form is capable of when awakened. Just like Doflamingo and Katakuri, he's changed his surrounding to rubber, even reversing a blast breath right back to Kaido in an amazing counterattack. Chapter 1045, he turns Kaido's body into rubber, which is insane because we see Doflamingo turn buildings into strings and Katakuri turn things into mochi. Of course, Law and of course Eustace Kid were able to, of course, make Big Mom's body magnetic and make Big Mom not be able to yell. But honestly, turning someone's body into rubber, insane. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, he can also turn into a giant. Yeah, there's nothing big, not a big deal, not a huge deal. And then we see the first drawback where he's of course drained. He looks like an old man. If you don't remember, we see that of course in the recent arc it takes about 32 seconds for Luffy to get back to normal form. While fighting Kaido, though, he kind of forces it back by forcing his heartbeat back at the Drums of Liberation. Then we see Kaido comment on Luffy, saying that he's coding Advanced Conqueror's Haki at the same time of coding Armored Haki while in this white transformation, just showing you how much his Delphoid Awakening and his Haki mastery is insane. And then after that, Kaido gets knocked down to the ground, which is big because we don't see Kaido get knocked down to the ground. For just a little bit of perspective, Zoro Ashura Conqueror's Haki attack didn't knock down Kaido. Yeah, it scarred him, but it didn't knock him down. Zoro comments on how he wished he knocked him down Kaido. So to see Luffy do that with his punch in Gear 5th, and Kaido's even in the next chapter grabbing his face, this reminds me when one of my friends, because Kaido says, "Who the hell are you?" while he's grabbing his face. And one of my friends was playing against this amazing player in this video game, and the guy replied after my friend beat him, "Who are you?" It's a sign of respect. When someone really good gets beaten, it's a sign of respect when they ask you, "Who are you?" Because Kaido knows who that is, but still, he's saying you are built different. He even turns lightning into rubber, which of course amuses Kaido, and uses the attack. It was one of the few times where Kaido actually dodges an attack from Luffy, showing how devastating Luffy is in this form. Kaido then goes on to say that strong Dove Fruits are not enough to conquer these seas, which is showing honestly how he sees Luffy's fruit as a very powerful fruit. He never saw that before when Luffy was using Gear 4th, but when Luffy uses of course Gear 5th, now he says that strong Dove Fruits are not enough to conquer the seas, showing ultimate respect for his Dove Fruit ability. Of course, we also have to talk about how Luffy tanks multiple Advanced Conqueror's Haki coded attacks in Kaido's strongest form, his hybrid form, and 2 blast breaths during this battle, showing how durable he is in this form. Of course, the end off this battle on Wano, Luffy then grabs Kaido and brings out the barrage gun, telling Momonosuke to move the island. Even Yamato comments, wait, Luffy, are you trying to punch through the entire island? That's how devastating this attack is. To put it in perspective, King Kong gun was city level when he used it on Doflamingo. This is island level. And honestly, he wasn't coding his attack King Kong gun with advanced Conqueror's Haki, which makes it even more devastating. And he wasn't coding in an advanced Armored Haki. Honestly, Kaido's magma form looks like to be his strongest form. He uses at the end of this fight the Great Blazing Dragon Torch. Keep in mind, Kaido decided to take this attack head on, knowing how big and coded it was in Haki. And people might say, wait a minute guys, Tripko, you're tripping. Luffy pretty much had so many chances to fight Kaido, and Kaido fought the Red Scabbards, the Worst Generation. Of course, he also fought Yamato and Momonosuke and Luffy so many times. He's probably worn out compared to Luffy. Well, Luffy, let's be honest here, he got distracted by CP0 and took a point-blank strong attack from Kaido that knocked him out. Luffy also before that got defeated by Kaido when it comes to the Advanced Conqueror's Haki clashes they were having. So Luffy has taken extreme damage in his battle too. So when it comes to Luffy in Gear 5th and Kaido at the end, honestly, it looks like they're on the same level of damage. Now, I want to mention Akainu because I did make a video about this recently. Akainu's Delphi ability is said to have the highest offensive power, and he evaporates Jozu's huge iceberg and even Ace's body, which was made by fire. And Oda stated, of course, like I said, he has the highest offensive Delphi. In my opinion, when it comes to Luffy and Kaido, their final attacks, I'll say right here, these are the strongest attacks we've seen in the series. Clashing, as Kaido said, he would evaporate Luffy's, and before it even came down. And of course, Blazing Bagua versus Barrage Gun, these are the strongest attacks we've seen in the entire series. Luffy beat the strongest creature alive in this Gear 5th form. And yes, I know Kaido took a lot of damage, like I said, I mentioned this earlier, but in general, Luffy also took a lot of damage before they actually had the final showdown in Luffy's Gear 5th form. Luffy's Gear 5th form after this fight, to me, was top 5 in the One Piece story. Now, the next arc is where we see the different form of Gear 5th. This is what I call base Gear 5th form I mentioned earlier in the video. We have Rob Lucci, whose awakened Zoan form is incredibly powerful, where even Vegapunk comments on the speed of Rob Lucci. And Lucci himself says, I gotten stronger just like you, Luffy. And Luffy is seemingly dodging all of Lucci's attacks relatively easily. Lucci's Haki is strong too. The fact that he's able to clash with his Armored Haki with Luffy in this Gear 5th form. And Luffy, of course, seemingly is overpowering Lucci, and it makes him even cough blood with another attack called Mogura, where Luffy puts his hand to the ground with rubber and comes out of nowhere and punches Lucci in the gut. But he's not using Advanced Conqueror's Haki, like I said. This is straight Luffy's Armored Haki and Delphi ability. Of course, people also have to respect Rob Lucci's power. This guy used a handgun and one-shotted Sentamaru, who's able to use Advanced Ryo, Advanced Armored Haki that Luffy was training in Prison of Udon. And the next chapter, Luffy tries to give him a benefit of the doubt, or what we call in the Smash community a John. And of course, Sentamaru says, no, I seen that attack coming, shut the hell up, you didn't distract me, I even tried to block it and he just overpowered me. Insane. Now, this is of course the same Rob Lucci who almost lost consciousness from the Dawn rocket, and even says what insane power. So Lucci is getting hit by some devastating attacks, and this is not even Luffy at Wano level. Now, of course, Rob Lucci doesn't recognize Luffy as a Yonko, but if he faced the Wano version of Gear 5th, the Nika that Luffy showcased, he would not share those same sentiments. Now, I do want to say this, Luffy does bring his Wano version of Gear 5th out versus the Admiral Kizaru. What I mean by that is he pretty much is using Conqueror's Haki coding with his Awakened. And this, you have to understand, pre-time skip, you could say Kizaru was around the same level as Akainu. Though I thought Akainu was stronger, all the animals were relative in power. So I do want to say this, Kizaru is one of the more powerful characters in the One Piece story. And what we saw in this Luffy versus Kizaru fight was a Conqueror's Haki coding kick in his base form to start it off, which of course Luffy saying he's 100 times stronger, to Snake Man Luffy really showing Kizaru how he beat Kaido. That is insane. I'm assuming that Snake Man Luffy was using a Future Sight, Advanced Armored Haki, even Advanced Conqueror's Haki for Kizaru to really give Snake Man Luffy that respect. Though of course we all saw Kizaru pretty much did in with Snake Man Luffy, and we all saw what happened. Kizaru then says speed is power, kicks Luffy into the Vega Force 01, and yeah, bye bye Snake Man Luffy. Then we saw Gear 5th Luffy, and he returns saying, oh, that barrier had to go through it twice and it burned, pretty much making it seem like it was nothing. And Luffy, of course, shows Kizaru his strength by throwing him all the way into the ocean, though Kizaru is able to escape near death by, of course, using his teleport ability. Then Kizaru cuts Luffy with a sword, but gets whipped and stamped with a dawn by Gear 5th Luffy. Luffy, of course, then ate Kizaru, and of course the beam was coming out of his eyes and was burning his eyes. But then, of course, I do want to talk about the end of this clash, was when Luffy did White Star Gun and pretty much knocks down Kizaru, and Kizaru's not able to move. Though Luffy gets out of Gear 5th, Kizaru can't move from this one punch that goes through his skull. Yes, Kizaru does get back up at the end, but still, just showing you that the power difference between Kizaru and Luffy there's a difference. So after going through Luffy and Akainu's power, I personally believe Akainu, I'll say this right now, he can beat Luffy Gear 5th if it has limitations. Because honestly, the way how savage Akainu is, if Luffy runs out of Gear 5th, yeah, it's going to be really tough for Luffy. But if he's able to, of course, somewhat battle in his base form with the Fleet Admiral, then go into his Gear 4th form with, of course, his advancement in both Observation and Armament Haki, and even Conqueror's Haki, of course, I'm talking about Snake Man and Bounce Man, then finally going into his Gear 5th, there is a chance. If Luffy's able to do that progress of his power scaling, if he's able to do it, that there is a chance. But you have to understand, we saw against a Naked Island, though yes, the circumstances were different, but he just went from base, Snake Man, and Gear 5th real fast. I think Luffy needs to really marinate those previous forms and then get into Gear 5th. But honestly, I truly believe that is a lot of variables you gotta trust, and I can't really trust that right now. So I do want to say this, when it comes to Luffy and Akainu, I do think because of his limitations, Akainu should win. Now, honestly, the only way I can see this fight happening is if, of course, Luffy's maybe protecting someone like Sabo or Dragon, and he comes in there because he doesn't want to lose them like his brother Ace. And that's possibly I can see this fight happening. But I'll tell you guys right now, in the possible storyline, I think when Luffy does go run into Akainu, he probably will be stronger than him. But right now, these limitations, if it's causing so much havoc against Kizaru, how much havoc will it cause against Akainu? That's my question for you guys. So definitely want to say, without limitations, Luffy easily, not easily, but he beats Akainu. With the limitations, Akainu should be able to edge him out.